The question is, how much is it going to be? Okay, so this is part 3 of the Saga of Kayin, an attempt to unify the saga.
Wow.
Yeah, okay, so last two, what was it? Oh, yeah, sorry, yeah. The reason why is I think better in PowerPoint. And so I decided to make this in PowerPoint. Yeah, you'll see what I mean. Yeah, okay, so last two shiurim we spent raising all the questions. And again, the main mission here is to try to come up with an approach to understand every single thing, not answer all the questions, but understand every episode in Kayin's saga as presented in the Chumash. And keyword here is attempt, okay? Because I don't think I can explain everything, but I think this is a solid theory, okay? What we're going to start off with is just, we're not going to read all the psukim like we did last time. I divided the whole story into 12 parts, okay? Just 12 episodes, okay? It's different than the division of paragraphs on there. So first you have the birth of Kayin and Hevel, okay, which includes their professions. Then the korbanos that they bring and the rejection of Kayin's and the acceptance of Hevel's. Episode 3 is Hashem's speech to Kayin with the whole, if you improve yourself, then you'll be whatever, and if not, then whatever, okay? 4 is Kayin's murder of Hevel. 5 is Hashem's rebuke of Kayin. 6 is Kayin's punishment. 7 is Kayin's negotiation, or whatever you want to call that, where he like talks to Hashem about that. 8 is the lineage of Kayin, all of his descendants and whatever information it gives about them. 9 is Lemech's speech, which is its own thing, even though it's part of the lineage. 10 is the birth of Shais, and 11 is the lineage of Shais. Now, we only read the very beginning of the lineage of Shais last time, but I actually realized when I was preparing this year that it goes on. I think the Saga of Kayin actually ends with the corruption of mankind before the Mabul, okay, which we didn't read, but we'll read that when we get to it. Okay, so I don't want to rush tonight, so I'm totally fine if we just like dwell and explore whatever ideas we have. But if I had a choice, we would get through the first 3 tonight, because really the way I view it is if you had to divide these in 2, it's 1 through 3, and then 4 through 12 is a whole nother thing, okay? But we're going to start, yeah, see, it's a whole saga, okay? But we're going to start with something that does not seem related. And again, I don't mind if we just like work on this just to get the idea clear, okay? So this is a mishnah in Pirkei Avos 4:2. Ben Azai Omer, so Ben Azai says, oh, and by the way, I didn't have time to put translations of everything. I'm going to put translations of the psukim because I already had them. Okay, so if you need me to repeat anything, let me know. So Ben Azai Omer, Ben Azai says, "Hevi rach l'mitzvah kala kavachamura." You should run to a light mitzvah like a strict mitzvah, or a heavy mitzvah, or a stringent mitzvah. Uboreach min havera, and you should flee from transgression. She mitzvah goreres mitzvah, because a mitzvah leads to another mitzvah, or literally drags along another mitzvah. Va'avera goreres avera, and an avera leads to another avera. Sheschar mitzvah, because the reward for a mitzvah is a mitzvah. Uschar avera, and the reward for an avera is an avera. Okay, you didn't know you got a reward for averas. Yeah, okay, so what are the questions just in isolation here?
Well, wait, schar doesn't mean literally like reward, it's more like merit, right?
Well, so if you want to be precise about it, so the Rambam differentiates between, should I read this? Yeah, let's read this. Why not? Rambam differentiates, so let's go here, hold on. Where is the Rambam talk about this? It's always good. Do you know the Rambam's policy about ikarim and teaching?
No.
So he says, I'll show you this also. We're not in any rush, but this is Nav. I don't know if you remember me telling you guys this in the in high school, but I know I've told it to certain classes of like, if you want to get me off topic, then this is how to do it. This is a tried and true method, because this is part of my teaching philosophy, which I got from the Rambam. So at the end of Makos, no, what am I saying? Not at the end of Makos. At the end of Brachos, the Rambam says like this. So he goes on a whole tangent about something, okay? And then at the very end, he says, this was not the place to talk about this, okay? Like the whole tangent that he talked about. Let me make it a little bit bigger. This is not the place to talk about this. Lule asher kavanasi kishiyavu davar be'inyan ha'emuna. Whenever something, an idea in like emuna comes up, like one of the foundations, I think Kafik says it better, as always. Someone's got to get this onto somewhere online. Okay, so this is the wrong volume. To keep just so you have it in mind, this is a tangent off of a tangent. Okay, this is a tangent that justifies the tangent, but it's an important one. Okay, so he says at the end of Brachos, this is in Brachos, Perek Tes, last Mishnah Zayin. He says, this is not the place to talk about this subject. Tamid b'chol makom, my style or my method in my way in each place. Is a remiz b'inyane ha'emuna. When there's any allusion, like even a hint at like something that has to do with belief, like fundamental beliefs, evair matu. I explained some of it a little bit. Ki chashuv etzli lahasbir yesod mehayesodos yoser mikol davar acher she'ani melamed. It is more important for me to explain any of the foundations of Torah than anything else that I teach. So I always just tell my students, if you want to get me off topic, then just bring in one of the Yesod Torah and then we'll get off topic. And the Yesod that we brought in here was reward and punishment. So that's why I want to just talk about this a little bit here, according to the Rambam, which again, I'm going to display the what do you call? I'll display, am I even? Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. I'll display the thing, but I'm going to read from the different translation. Oh, I did get the right volume for this other part. That's why I grabbed it. So it says in the Mishnah, that Antignos ish socho kibel mishimun hatzadik. Antignos ish socho received Torah from Shimon hatzadik. Hu haya omer, he would say, Al tihiu ka'avadim hamshamshim esarav almanas l'kabel pras. You should not be like servants who serve the master with the intent to receive reward. Okay, that's usually how it's translated, pras. Ella hevu ka'avadim hamshamshim esarav almanas. The Ram. Okay. Ram has a different text of the Mishnah. Okay, it is a machlokas rishonim, but the Rambam has a different text of the Mishnah here. So he says, don't be like servants who serve their master with the intent to receive reward. Rather, be like servants who serve their master al menas shalola kabal pras, with the intent to not receive reward. Okay, this Mishnah says without the intent to receive reward, as opposed to with the intent to not receive reward. V'hi mora shamayim alechem, and the fear of heaven should be upon you. So, do you know the story of what happened here? Of Antignos Isocho and his students. So he ringing a bell.
I know there's something, but
yeah. So basically, he had two students, Sadok and Baisos, and they heard their teacher say this, and they said, "Oh, why is our Rebbe telling us not to serve God or to serve God with the intent to not receive reward? Must be there is no reward." And then they went off and became heretics, and they started their own sects. That's the Tadukim the Baisusim. Okay, so the Rambam has to clarify. Okay, and again, I'm reading in the Kafik translation. He says, "Pras," the word "pras" in the Mishnah. So the reason why we're going here is to explain the difference between schar, which our Mishnah uses, and then this Mishnah says pras. So pras nikra hagumul shagomel ha'adam lamish ein lo alav chov. Pras refers to the recompense, like the payment that you give to someone who you have no obligation to pay. Okay. Ella osa es hadavar b'der chasidus v'hatava. You're just doing it by way of kindness or beneficence. Kagon shiomer la'avdo or lebeno lahakatan, like you say to your servant who you don't owe anything to because he's your slave, or your son because he's your son, o l'ishto, or your wife. Asay kach eten lecha dinar. Do this and I'll give you $1, or shnei dinar, or $2. V'zehu ha'hevdel bein pras v'sachar. This is the difference between pras and schar or sachar. Ki sachar nikba b'chov. Sachar is established by law. So the difference is pras. So there's actually an English word that either comes from the word pras or is like etymologically tracing back to prize. Yeah, okay, right. So pras is a prize. It's just, hey, here's a prize. Okay, whereas sachar is the word that it uses, let's say, for like a hired worker is a sachir, like you owe him the money. It comes of necessity. Okay. So the difference, going back to our Mishnah here, is so when Antignos Isocho was saying don't serve God with the intent to receive pras, that's because pras is not something that would be a very low level where you're like basically like serving God and expecting to get like points or something like that, whereas schar is like a mature understanding that there is lawfulness in how God operates the universe, and there is there are benefits that you get of necessity when you do the mitzvahs or when you learn, which is kind of which is what this is going to be talking about. Yeah. So did that answer what was your question? Yeah.
You said when you translated this, you translated that the reward for mitzvah is mitzvah. And the
Yes.
reward for merit is merit.
Right.
I was saying that seems a little not good.
Yeah.
Like the consequence.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Good. So what kind? Can you define what is like not good about saying the reward for a mitzvah is a mitzvah? There's like a problem with that.
The reward for getting a mitzvah. I mean, it sounds like it's which is like given to you.
Okay, that is
When
true.
In reality, it's the natural byproduct. By doing mitzvah, you're going to make yourself into a better
Right.
person.
So
a better person,
let me.
so
You are 100% correct, and that's actually what the Meiri is going to say. But pretend you don't know what reward is. There's like a structural, logical problem with this. If I say do mitzvahs, and you say why, and I say to get reward, and you say what's the reward, and I say is that the reward.
Oh, then there's no point.
Yeah, so it's circular, right?
Yeah.
Like scar all the way down, you know. So it needs to be defined in a way that it's not circular, you know. So that I'm filling in that step because that's what pushes you to say that it must be something other than just another mitzvah, you know. Yeah, okay. So that's one question, okay, which is what does it mean by schar mitzvah and schar avera? And then another question is what does it mean that a mitzvah leads to a mitzvah and avera leads to an avera? Like what's the cause and effect relationship there? Right?
Is there a difference between mitzvah and Torah?
Yes. And that's the other question is why do you need to say both, right? Especially because like the way it reads like a chain, right? Run to a light mitzvah like a stringent mitzvah and flee from an avera because a mitzvah leads to another mitzvah and an avera leads to another mitzvah because the reward for a mitzvah is a mitzvah and the reward for an avera is an avera. So ultimately, why don't you just like cut out the middleman and say like, you know, like apparently you need both steps, you know, you need mitzvah guresh mitzvah, avera guresh avera, and schar mitzvah, schar avera. Right, they're not. So the question is, what is the difference between each one and how are they related? How are the two clauses related?
Leads is not like necessary. I mean like there's like just because like something like just because you've gone down a path and now you can like go further.
Yeah.
Does not imply like actually taking that step further.
Okay, you know what? I'm just going to double check and make sure that I'm not mistranslating because I do believe, and I don't know if this is going to invalidate your point at all, but I do believe that, yeah, thanks. I just want to find it, make sure that it's worth sharing. I want to look at the word gorer. I don't even know if it's biblical Hebrew though. That's my problem. Misgorer, Yiskoruru. Well, I guess actually I could just take either one. And I believe gorer, oh, you're gonna look at the dictionary again?
Yeah,
That would be
sure.
helpful. Yeah, sure. I believe gorer is to drag.
Gimel
Reish reish, yeah. Sojourn, okay, that's the biblical Hebrew meaning. Abide, stir up, quarrel, gather together, dread. Yeah, I think it might be rabbinic Hebrew, the way that mitzvah gorer is mitzvah. But if it meant drag, like the reason why I'm getting that from in Ramam and Hilchos Tshuva in the Koseres, he says, mitzvah v'ha'ikarim hanigrarim ima biglala, and the ikarim that are dragged along with it. You know, so dragging to me does imply that like it is attached in like a necessary way.
So drag, yes, leads is
Right,
not.
leads is not, yeah.
Haul, drag.
Yeah, there you go, yeah.
Entail.
Yeah.
Also used for like drawing a carriage.
Right,
Or a sled, or a
right.
slide.
Yeah, so I guess I did misspeak earlier when I said it means to lead to. It means it drags along another mitzvah. And it's also funny because like dragging in the metaphor is a little different than payment because dragging is like I'm walking and then I'm dragging a thing behind me. Payment is like I do the thing and then I get something.
Well, you're not walking. The mitzvah.
The mitzvah's walking, correct, right? It's like the mitzvah is dragging along another mitzvah as opposed to like you put a mitzvah coin into the vending machine and you get another mitzvah, you know? Yeah.
Well,
It's like different imagery.
It's not effectively the same as the mitzvah leads to other mitzvah.
Right, that's our problem. Right, is like the problem is what is the difference? Oh, you mean, well, has a different kind of, which one is the same?
I'll say,
Reward?
translating mitzvah gorer mitzvah.
Yeah.
If you translate it as a mitzvah drags along another mitzvah.
Yeah.
And if you translate it as a mitzvah leads to another mitzvah, what's the difference?
Well, because Sean was saying how leads to is not of necessity.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be that way, whereas drag does imply that.
also like I was saying like
Okay.
but think about like paths,
Yeah,
right? So if you take a step up on the mitzvah path, right?
Yeah.
So to say, right? So then that's going to lead further down the mitzvah path also has further mitzvah.
Right.
Right, but you don't need to take that next step. To go
Right.
to the next
Right.
mitzvah.
Just because it leads there doesn't mean that it's going to take you there.
Yeah, you
Right.
could
Yeah.
Turn back.
Right.
And take the other.
Right. But if you're walking and like there's mitzvahs dragging behind you, or if you're doing a mitzvah and there's like mitzvahs attached to it, then that's like a different,
Like
then you're going to
conveyor
get
belt,
like what?
like a conveyor belt.
Yeah, exactly. Or yeah. I was thinking for some reason more like I don't know. It doesn't matter what I was thinking. Yeah, it's just my imagination. Okay. Yeah. So anyone want to explain anything about this? Oh, sorry. And then one more question is, how does all this connect to the advice of you should run to a light mitzvah like a stringent mitzvah? And the reason I'm asking that is because earlier in Pirkei Avos, it says that it said something very similar, which is, where's Isaac when you need him? I'll just say it. Oh, I'm looking in the wrong Masechta. That's why I'm not finding it. It says earlier in Pirkei Avos, I think chapter 2. Yeah. Yes. It says, heavy zahir b'mitzvah kala k'mitzvah chamor. You should be careful with a light mitzvah like a heavy mitzvah. She'ein ata yodeh matan schar shel mitzvos, because you don't know the reward or the schar of mitzvos. Heavy machash. Yeah. So that's like saying that since you don't know, like you could have a light mitzvah that's really worth a lot of schar, you should be careful with all mitzvos. So like, what is the difference? Like, it seems like you get to the same message as you should run to a light mitzvah. Yeah.
The other thing that's strange is, right, you split up mitzvah in that there's like easy ones and like hard ones, but you don't do that with a bear.
Okay. So that's a good question. I mean, in this, it doesn't say that. Yeah. So the Meiri actually starts off by clarifying that point, which I think is a good read. He says, Ben Azai Omer, heavy rats l'mitzvah kala v'chule, amar shihe rats l'mitzvah kala kavachamura, v'shihe borech min ha'avera. Kolomar, what does it mean you should flee from an avera? Shidhe borech gam kein min ha'kala kibrichascha min ha'chamura. You should flee from a light avera just like you do from a heavy avera. Yeah. So it reads much better that way, right?
Yeah, but why doesn't it say that? Like,
yeah,
especially because we've been preserving parallelism and
that's definitely true.
Except that one point.
Yeah, that's definitely true. He does not answer that question. He just says like, it's possible. Wait, can we answer it? Okay, I don't know if this is a weak answer, but like with mitzvos, not all mitzvos are things you have to do, right? There's mitzvos that like you have to say Kriya Shema twice a day and you have to put on tefillin. Then there are other mitzvos where like if you do it, it's a good thing, but there's nothing compelling. Like the Rambam's example of like, if you don't have a house, you don't have to do mezuzah ever. So there's no obligation. You have to go buy a house to get a mezuzah to put it on, but avera, you always want to flee from an avera. So it could be that it's stating it in a much more absolute way so as to not imply like any sort of quantitative difference in how we regard averos, even though that is kind of the message. Like, in other words, it's like, once you start making distinctions within averos, then there's like a implication of like, oh, like this is just a light avera, So I don't know if that's a good answer. Because we're answering stylistically, yeah, right. I also forgot to say we have to ask the question: what is the difference between an avera kala and an avera chamura, and a mitzvah kala and a mitzvah chamura? Mm-hmm. So the avera one is actually a halachic distinction, which the Rambam defines in Hilas Tshuva. Anyone know the difference between a avera chamura and an avera kala? In the first paragraph of Hilas Tshuva, I'll share the screen in a second.
You think of examples, I can't think of a definition.
Yeah, well, let's see if your examples will line up with the definition.
I feel like murder would probably be a bigger
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with that one.
I don't know. A small one would be like not wearing TP or something.
Okay, so it's interesting, by the way. So it's interesting. That's not an avera. That is a bittul. Yeah, well, that's not even an. Okay, let's get our terms clear. Yeah, that's a bittul aseh. Right. So avera is specifically used when you violate a prohibition or los aseh, and a bittul aseh is used for a mitzvah aseh. So Rambam says in Hilchos Tshuva Perek Aleph Halacha Beis, umahin hakalos umahin hachamuros. And the context here, by the way, is the shiur mishtaleach on Yom Kippurim, the goat that's thrown off a cliff. It atones for the kalos and the chamuros for someone who did tshuva. But if you don't do tshuva, then it only atones for the kalos, but not the chamuros. That's the context. So the Rambam says, "Mahina kalos, mahina chamuros. Hachamuros hin averos shechayavin aleihin misas beistin o kares." So the stringent averos are the ones that you're liable for the death penalty or for kares. Okay, and he doesn't mean ones that you become convicted of the death penalty. He means like let's say like you you murder someone and there are no witnesses, so you're not going to get put to death, but it's murder still is a mitzvah, is an avera that's high of death penalty. And then there's two more, shvua shav and shvua sheker, oaths in vain and false oaths. Okay, those are also included in the chamuros. Alpha pisha in bakaris harim in chamuros, and plain shas because they involve God's name. Okay, ushar mitzvos losase u mitzvos aseh she'in bahem kares hinakalos, and then the losase and all the mitzvos aseh that don't have kares are the light ones, and there are only two mitzvos aseh that are chayav kares. Korban Pesach and Bris Milah. Okay, yeah. All right, so those are for the averos, but then the mitzvos, mitzvah kala and mitzvah chamor doesn't really have a definition. Okay, so what would you guess the definition is? Like, there's no halachic definition for that. I think you even said it earlier, just intuitively.
Again, yeah, I can't think of definitions. I can think of examples.
Yeah, like what?
Shabbos and kashrut are probably big mitzvahs.
Well, Shabbos and kashrut are not mitzvos; they're avera. I mean, in this language, mitzvah is like an aseh, and avera is los aseh. Yeah, yeah.
So it's stealing where you can return the money.
Okay.
Right. Like there is some damage that
Yeah.
the person is not going to, like, you can't fully pay them back because they won't have the money when you stole it, right? Which is going to have its own damages. But you can return. There is like a.
So are you saying the mitzvah of returning the theft?
No, I'm saying theft as an avera.
Oh, it's an avera. Okay, it was still in the avera thing. Okay, yeah.
Because it has some way in which you can.
Okay,
reverse it.
so theoretically, within the averos, there are also varying degrees, perhaps. But in the Rambam's definition, stealing is automatically a kal avera because it is not chayav misa or a kares. Yeah, but you're right. Is that within the averos, then there might be further distinctions about whether you can make restitution or not. Yeah, but think of mitzvos aseh. How would you classify mitzvos aseh as kal and chamor?
And we're not just doing the kares with.
You can do that. There's two mitzvahs.
You could say that if you want to. Yeah, yeah, that could be. Yeah, that could be. I've never seen it, but that could be.
And I could say it's the 6 mitzvah which are obligated all the time. But
That's-
that doesn't work with this because instead you need to
Run to it, right? Yeah, yeah. Run to Yedias Hashem. Well, you could run to Yedias Hashem, you know.
It's a little weird stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's one answer that the Rambam gives in that earlier mishnah that I quoted about the calculate, or you should be careful with a light mitzvah like a heavy mitzvah. So he says for mitzvos, then he says yesh derech ha'aracha. There is a way to evaluate mitzvos. Okay, like which ones are kal and which ones are chamor. V'hu. Oh, sorry, no. That's not kal and chamor. This is the reward for mitzvos. Hold on. Yeah, that's a different thing. Okay, so this is not relevant. So I think, and I think you said this, that kal and chamor has to do with how easy it is to do the mitzvah. You know, like it's a very easy thing to what's an easy mitzvah? Saying the Shema is a very easy mitzvah, right? Just to be yotzei saying Shema. Picking up a lulav is a very easy mitzvah. Kibbut avim is a very hard mitzvah, you know, or like you know, I don't know why they say this, but they say, you know, when they say the Vilna Gaon said the hardest mitzvah is, I don't know why, is Simchas Yom Tov. I don't know why. I feel like you can make a lot of jokes about that. Maybe because like he held that you have to be like in a constant state of simcha. I don't know what it is. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let's work with that understanding for now, meaning that it's easy to run to a. Oh, does that even work with this? No, that doesn't seem like it works with this at all, right? Because the Mishnah kind of presumes that you will be running to a Chamura mitzvah, but not a Kal one. Yes, it doesn't work like that. So maybe the Rambam's the thing that I was going to read is relevant. The Rambam says in that Mishnah about calculating the reward and punishment, he says that how do you know the reward and punishment for a mitzvah? He says Yesh derech ha'aracha, there is a way to evaluate v'hu, namely shekol mitzvos aseh she'ata motze shechayev es ha'over aleha chiyuv chamor teda shebekiuma yesh sachar gadol. Okay, so he says, it is kind of like what you were saying a little bit. He says, any mitzvos aseh where you find that if you violate the corresponding losa aseh, then you get a big punishment, then you should know that when you fulfill the aseh, then you get a big reward. And he gives an example. And resting on Shabbos, vasias ma'akeh, okay, and making a fence around your roof. Ko elu mitzvos aseh, ela shechayev es ha'oseh melacha b'Shabbos skila. But if you violate Shabbos, if you do malach on Shabbos, you get stoned to death. V'mavatel es hamila or korban b'moado kares, mila and korban pesach are kares. V'hasam damim beveso, if you do something that results in bloodshed in your house, la b'hu amru lo sesim damim v'zeh tilman ki shkar shavisa b'Shabbos gadol ma'od yosem miskar hamila. So the reward for Shabbos is greater than the reward for Mila because skila is worse than kares. Uskar Mila gadol lifnei Hashem miskar asiyas ma'akeh, and the reward for Mila is greater before Hashem than the reward for building a fence around your house. V'zehu amru hevi mechashev hefsed mitzvah k'neged skara. That's how you calculate. Yeah, that's interesting. That's not going to work out for everyone though. Like there are not many mitzvahs where there's like a corresponding losa say, you know. Yeah. Yeah.
Not the whole point.
Right.
You don't know which.
Right. Yeah. And it says that in the Mishnah. You don't know which one. Yeah.
Those mitzvahs aren't that important.
That could be right. It could be that the reason why there's a low say is because it's important. Yeah, it's just hard to say that like for example, there's no low, like I think we would all agree that Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem are pretty big mitzvos, but there's no, and because we say that the highest level is Avas Hashem, but there's no low say that corresponds to like that's the antithesis of loving Hashem.
What is that?
Yeah, but that's not really the opposite of loving Hashem. Avodah Zarah is the opposite of Anochi Hashem Elokecha. You know, Avos Hashem is like an attitude. You know, yeah. Maybe you could say Lo Sasur Achrei Levavchem Achrei Nechem is opposite of love of Hashem. Yeah. Yeah, but that's not a Lo Saseh though.
Yeah, but if you do a sin for the purpose of your hatred of Hashem.
Yeah. So you could maybe argue that blasphemy is that, because blasphemy is when you do it out of anger. Yeah. Okay. Interesting question. So whatever it is, that's our best answer that we can get here for run to a light mitzvah like a stringent mitzvah. Okay, but now let's try to understand these other two things of the mitzvah goreros mitzvah and avera goreros avera.
Okay, so I thought is that in general there's two kinds of if-then statements.
Okay.
There's a necessary one and a sufficient.
Right.
So a necessary statement, a necessary if-then statement is saying like only if you water your plants, then it will grow. Mm-hmm. Meaning that if you do the thing, meaning that the thing is a prerequisite for the consequence. Not that if you do it, then it will happen. Right. We're saying the only way it will ever happen
is if you do it. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And the other kind is saying that if you do this thing, then this thing will happen. There could be there's other ways to do it. That this is just one of them. Right. So if you walk through the doors, then you will be in the building. Right. I don't know. You could go through the window. Right. But that's the way to do it. So this is saying that it's both necessary and sufficient. So it's saying mitzvah gorer mitzvah, it's saying if you like walk on the path of mitzvah, so to speak, then that leads to more mitzvah. Yeah. So that's necessary. Meaning doing mitzvah is a prerequisite to doing more mitzvah. Okay. And then it's saying schar mitzvah, the reward for mitzvah is more mitzvah. It's saying that it's sufficient also. So if you do mitzvah, then it will naturally lead to more mitzvah.
Okay, I hear that. Can we give an example though to make sure we understand it? Within
like a specific mitzvah, how this works.
Yeah.
If you wear tzitzit, then you will be Then you will be reminded of the mitzvah because that's what tzitzit is before. And
that's going to lead you to do more mitzvah.
So that will definitely lead you to do more mitzvah. Yeah. And also, if you weren't wearing those tzitzit, then you would not be reminded of those mitzvahs, so you would not even be like in the ballpark of doing it. So it will both lead you to do it and it will unlock the capability of doing it.
Does that actually work out though? Like couldn't you be reminded to do mitzvahs through things other than tzitzis?
Right.
Yeah.
Right, to me seems that there's like an interconnectionality between mitzvah, meaning like when you relate to one mitzvah, you can't just relate to it like in a vacuum.
Yeah.
But that like naturally the mind is going to wander off into other things that
Yeah.
are dragged along with it.
Uh-huh.
When one person's engaged with this thing, because the mitzvah are relational to other mitzvah, therefore they're going to bring associations.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily mean that you need to go like down those associations.
Yeah.
But they're going to be more in your mind than.
So I'll tell you an analogy that's bringing to mind, and again, this is just maybe just my imagination and helps no one but me. Like if you had a picture of a net, and it's a magnetic net, and mitzvahs are magnetic. So when you do mitzvah, you're like casting this net out, and whatever the net like goes on, it like attracts these other mitzvahs, and then when you drag it in, you're getting like lots of other mitzvahs. That doesn't help the understanding. I'm just saying like
I was more yes. I was thinking about it in terms of like the psychological phenomenon of like the shotgun effect.
Yeah.
When you think of one thing,
right?
You think about like a bunch of other related things.
Yeah.
Because that one thing is connected to a bunch of other neurons.
Okay. Good. So let's see the Meiri's interpretation because it's in line with that, but he develops it a little bit in surprising directions. Okay. So the Meiri goes on, and he says, "Oh, sorry, we didn't read the last line." He says, "Kolomar hamitzvah kala teviach chamura." So he says a mitzvah will bring you to a more stringent mitzvah. V'chein avera ba'avera, and an avera will bring you to a more stringent avera. Okay, so he is learning that the whole mishnah is shorthand here, right? That it's shorthand with borech ben avera really means flee from a light one like a heavy one, and a mitzvah leads to a mitzvah, meaning a light mitzvah leads to a heavy mitzvah, and a drags along a heavy mitzvah, and a light avera drags along a heavy avera, and the reward for a light mitzvah is a heavy mitzvah, and the reward for a light avera is a heavy avera. That actually answers the question more about why it's short on that. It's not just short on this one thing. He's like being concise in the entire thing. Yeah. Okay. So what is he going to say now? So this is his interpretation. This is a great interpretation here, if I may say so. Yeah. Oh, you had a question? No. Okay. V'zehu sheskar mitzvah. So this is what it means. Kolomar. Nimshach mimena mitzvah acheres. Another mitzvah will be drawn by it. V'chein schar avera avera shenimshach mimena avera acheres. That same thing with the reward of an avera is an avera. Another avera will be drawn by it. How so? 3 ways. Im mitzad gumul haonesh. And if I had to guess, I would say that this is a typo. I think it's supposed to be gumul ve'onesh. Okay, but whatever. Whether because of reward and punishment, im mitzad hahergel, or because of habit, im lifami mederech mikre, or sometimes because of chance. Okay, so he's going to give examples. Actually, sorry, he only gives examples of the third category. So reward and punishment, what's shot in that? So this is actually, we referenced this in Rama Bakiyush here, which I said I would get back to, but we didn't, which is that if the way brachos and klolos work, according to the Rambam at least, is if you are on the path of mitzvos and chachma, so then God will provide you with the goods in this world that facilitate your ability to continue being involved in mitzvos and Torah and chachma without worry. So let's say like rain in its proper time and like protection from your enemies. And then you will be able to be involved in even more mitzvos and Torah, and then you'll get olam haba, you know? And if you remove yourself from Torah and mitzvos, he will remove those goods, and you'll basically be in a state of poverty and sickness and like, you know, fighting with your enemies, and it'll remove your opportunities for doing mitzvos, and you'll be exposed to averos. So that's what I understand reward and punishment to be. So the more you do mitzvos, the more you're going to the more God is going to facilitate your ability to do more mitzvos in Torah. And same thing with averos. The more averos you do, the more God is going to withdraw those goods, and you'll be like caught up in the averos. Okay.
Wait, is it like or is it just that your personality, the way that you are?
So the reason why I'm saying here it definitely means hashgacha is because the next one is habit, which sounds like a personality thing.
Okay.
Right. So the fact that he differentiates between them. So then habit is connected to what you were saying, right? Which is that, I mean, there's lots of ways you form habits, but one of them is mental associations. You know, another way is however you hold conditioning works, you know, in terms of like, I don't know, like dopamine and all these, you know, other things that make us like, you know, attached to certain behaviors and getting stuff out of them. And certainly bad habits also work in the same way. Okay. And then mikre by accident or by chance is the most interesting one. Okay. Which, by the way, okay, well, I'll say it afterwards. So he says, the efshar shehanimshachas mizo hakala tie chamura kmo shetomar. So he's going to give an example of by chance, okay? But he says it's possible that the one that is dragged after the light one will be strict. Okay, kmo shetomar, for example, shabal lignav. Let's say you break into someone's house to steal something, okay? Umatzu bal habayis, and the homeowner is there. Okay, you thought the house was empty. V'haganav yatris knegdo. And the thief, I thought Yatris meant he defends himself against the homeowner, and it could be that. Okay, but they get into some sort of altercation, V'yakum alav v'hargei, and then he gets him and kills him. So you went in there just intending to steal, but then you end up murdering the guy, okay, or killing the guy, right? So that's what I understand by mikra to be, which is like, okay, again, I have to advertise this because this is you're missing in your life if you've never seen Breaking Bad. Okay, Breaking Bad is the greatest show that has ever been made. And spoiler alert, he breaks bad. Okay, so the show is about a chemistry teacher who is dying of cancer. This is all in the first episode. And he wants to find a way to provide for his wife and son and an unborn son. So he basically says, oh, I'm a chemistry teacher, I can cook really good meth. And his calculus is basically meth is illegal, but if I cook enough meth and sell it, I can provide for my family. And over the course of the entire show, he becomes more and more drawn into the criminal world, more and more drawn into bad midos, more and more drawn into being addicted to things that are bad for him in terms of violence and power and all this other stuff. And so it really is an example of at least these second two categories is habit. But then the mikra thing is if you are not involved in the legal drug trade, there are just certain things you're not going to come in contact with, And similarly on the mitzvah side, if you, let's say drive from college to yeshiva, and put yourself in a base midrash environment, just when you're here, you will encounter people talking about ideas, opportunities to daven with the minyan, other mitzvos, and by happenstance, you will expose yourself to more mitzvos and you'll do them. Funny thing, just as a side point, I feel like there are many people who would be in a situation like that, they would come to, let's say they're on the fence whether to come to minyan, and they go to minyan, and as a result of that they get the opportunity to give tzedakah, and they'd say oh, you see, God set it up for me to get tzedakah, and the Meiri would say, well, that's one possibility. It's possible that God is rewarding you with one mitzvah for the other. It's possible it's by chance, and it's possible it's by habit, so it's just, these are three useful categories to have. Okay, so that's how he's explaining the reward for a mitzvah is a mitzvah and the reward for an avera is an avera. Really, I think it's a better explanation for how a mitzvah drags along a mitzvah and an avera drags along an avera. But he says it's the schar thing, and he doesn't go back and explain the goreres thing. Okay, so any questions on that before we get to the next part? Because the next part is he really explains the reward thing. Okay, so now he says what you said. Okay, v'yesh lefarsh sachar b'makom pri. So he says here reward. Instead of saying reward, it really means pri, not fruit, but outcome, okay, or consequence. Kolomar she'ikar ha-mitzvah, and this is a beautiful line, ikar ha-mitzvah upirya hu ha-muvan mimena. The essential reward and outcome of a mitzvah is the insight you get from it, okay, is muvan, like tavuna, the thing you understand from it. And he gives examples, okay, about how a mitzvah kala can lead to a chamura. Sometimes you will think about a mitzvah that it is kal. That's, I accidentally deleted a letter here. It's supposed to say reshumos. Reshumos hachokakus. I think it's supposed to say hachakukus b'seichel. That you think there's an easy mitzvah, but as a result of it, it will imprint. It'll leave impressions on your intellect. Pinos, gedolos, torios, o unios, either huge foundations of Torah or huge foundations of philosophy. And he gives an example. Okay, in the Kriya Shema, okay, Kriya Shema is a mitzvah kal, okay, by any metric, it's easy to do, and there's no punishment there's no aver that corresponds to not saying the Shema, right? There's no anti-Shema, unless you pledge your life to Jesus or something, that might be an anti-Shema. But what happens is emunas hayichud, you get you're reinforcing your conviction in God's oneness, which is the most important idea. Umitzvos Pesach, and same thing with Pesach, which is not exactly a light mitzvah. I don't know why he gives that as an example. Emunus ha'elokus, it instills conviction in God. V'shinui hatvayim, and God's ability to change nature. Hanimshachas achar emunus chidush ha'olam, which itself is drawn after the belief in the creation of the world. Okay, so the point is that you should look for that. You should do a mitzvah. Okay, here's how I would explain. You know, when they say in the beginning of movies, like inspired by a true story, this is inspired by a true Meiri. Okay, what I'm about to say, which is mitzvah gureris mitzvah. Oh, in fact, I wrote this as a summary. Okay, summarize, and this is my summary. One mitzvah leads to another one, and one avera leads to another in one of three ways. Reward and punishment, meaning God will either provide you with opportunities for mitzvahs or deprive you of opportunities for mitzvahs, and same thing with averos. 2, habit. Once you become accustomed to doing mitzvahs and averos, then you will become you'll continue, the habit will lead you to something more strict. 3 is chance. You end up in circumstances as a result of your mitzvah or avera, which lead you to more of the same. And then, oh, maybe I didn't summarize this. So the way I would summarize it is that is mitzvah gureris mitzvah and avera gureris avera, that phenomenon. And then schar mitzvah mitzvah and schar avera avera is not that the reward is a mitzvah, but that the fruit of the mitzvah is the insight you derive from it, which means that as a result of something that seems like a light mitzvah, you can get a really important idea. And he doesn't spell out the avera thing, but presumably as a result of doing a light avera, it can reinforce something that is a very like bad consequence. You know, like a good example of this is kashrus. You know, kashrus is a very light mitzvah, light avera compared to, like, you know, other stuff. Most kashrus is just chayav malchus, you know, not kares. But what is the underlying value of all of kashrus? Like, what midah is it like instilling? What book of the Rambam does he put it in of the 14 books? No, close though. Kedusha. Okay, and Kedusha means transcending your animalistic nature through your intellect. And kashrus is a way of practicing that, of like exercising self-control. So like, yeah, if you eat a piece of pork, you don't get kares, you don't get death, but you are also giving into an animalistic tendency that undermines your Kedusha, which is like a huge thing, you know? Okay, so that is the Meiri on Avos 4.2. Okay, so what does this have to do with anything? This is what I want to say the main idea of the Saga of Kayin is. So in 2 sentences, it is avera gureris avera and schar avera avera are true, not only in the life of the individual, but also in their impact on future generations and ultimately on the entire world. And the Torah tells us the Saga of Kayin and his descendants as a cautionary example of this phenomenon. Okay, that's the theory that we're going to try to explore and develop. Okay, so are you ready to dive in? Okay, all right. So the first thing was the birth of Kayin and Hevel, which I said is the first episode. Okay, but it actually starts before that with Adam and Chava. Okay, so there's actually a stage before the 12 episodes, which is Adam, the Chet of Adam and Chava. All right, now I summarized this briefly in one of the shiurim, but I'm just going to do it again for the sake of completeness here. So in the account of Gan Eden, and we're not going to go into a whole Gan Eden thing. I mean, that's another thing, but we're just going to take this little piece from it. The way that the Nachash appealed to Chava is, so first he said, he said to the woman, is it true that God said don't eat from any tree of the garden? But Tomer Ha'isha hanachash, and the woman said to the snake, we can eat from the trees of the garden. But from the fruit of the tree that's in the middle of the garden, Amar Elokim, God said, Lo tigubo, don't eat from it and don't touch it, pentamusun, lest you'll die. So the Nachash said to her, you will not die. Kiyodea Elokim, because God knows, on the day you eat from it, the nifkachu einechem, and your eyes will be open. V'yisem kelohim yodei tovara. Big machlokas on what v'yisem kelohim means. Most of the Mefarshim say that Elohim is used here in the sense of leaders, like you will be like leaders or judges, knowing good and evil. Rashi though says Kiyodea. He says v'chol uman sone es bnei umanusa. Any craftsman hates his competitors. Okay, like if you're you're the only fisherman, you hate the other fisherman. Okay, why? Or right, because they're going to take your fish. Min ha'etz hazeh achal ubara es ha'olam. So the snake claimed to her, how did God create the world? He ate from the tree and created the world. Okay, where did the tree come from? I don't know. Okay, right. And then he says, what is an Invisim Kelohim that you'll eat from the, you'll be like gods, Yotre Olamos, you will be creators of worlds. Okay, so according to Rashi, the fantasy that he was, this Nakash was appealing to Adam and Chava with is something that I like to call the God fantasy. You will be like God, and God essentially means creators of worlds. Okay, so they eat, they get rebuked, and then they get punished. Okay, so you have their punishments here. And just in the interest of time, I'm going to summarize this. So I pulled this slide. Navi will recognize this. I pulled this from our 12th grade commerce class. So there are here is a list of the consequences or curses that came from the tree. So the first thing was they got a conscience, right? That's they noticed that they were naked and they covered up, which they didn't have before. Then they had the punishments or the curses of Adam and Chava, which were for Chava, motherhood pains, meaning pain while she is pregnant and giving birth and raising her kids. Another curse was desire for her husband. Okay, that's maybe we should have read it. Yeah, let's read it. El Ha'isha Amar, to the woman he said, Harba arbe itzvonech veheronech, I will increase your suffering and your pregnancy. Be'etzev taladi banim, in pain you will rear children. Vel ishech tushukasech, and your desire will be for your man, v'hu yimshalbach, and he will rule over you. Okay, and then to the man, the man, he said, because you listen to the voice of your wife, and you ate from the tree which he commanded you, saying, don't eat from it. The earth will be cursed because of you. In pain and suffering, you will eat from it all the days of your life. The coats thorns and thistles will grow for you, and you eat the grass of the field. By the sweat of your brow, you will eat bread. Until you return to the earth. Because you were taken from there. Because you are dust, and to dust you will return. And then right after that, weird non sequitur. And the man called the name of his wife Chava because she was the mother of all living humans. Okay, it's weird. Okay, so she gets motherhood pains, desire for her husband, and then he will rule over you. And then Adam gets the earth is cursed, thorns and thistles will grow, and you're going to work for the rest of your life. Okay, until you die. And then they both get, okay, plain shot is they get mortality. You're going to die. You're being kicked out from the Gan Eden, so you won't get the Itahara. Okay, so again, this is all another shiur, but just these are the premises I'm working with here. The reason why basically what happened when they ate from the Eitz Das Tovara is their Yetzer Hara increased in every way. And there are three ways that the Yetzer Hara, three dimensions of the Yetzer Hara. The first is the instinctual part, the animalistic part, the part that's just like pleasure, pain, the id, whatever you want to call it. And for that, they got the conscience to counteract that, So beforehand, they didn't need a conscience because they didn't have extreme desires attached to their instinctual things. Like I was just reading the Abrabnel, he says their private parts were they related to them the same way that they related to their hands or their feet. Like, okay, this is part of my body that I use for stuff. But then after the hate, they associated all of the desire, like sexual desire, with that. And so God gave them the conscience, guilt and shame to counteract, to prevent them from acting on that, even though conscience is not what we should base our decisions on, but it stops us from acting, okay, on instinctual ways. Okay. This is the part we're going to focus on, though, is the punishment and the curses counteracted the egotistical part of the Itahara. Okay, the part that makes you want to feel great and in control. So for Chava, and this is the part I mentioned a couple times ago, what is woman's greatest God fantasy is the fantasy of creating life. Like the only one who can create life is God and now woman, right? And so when her way of feeling like she's a Yotzer Olamos, like she creates worlds, is that her body makes other human beings. Okay, so the pain counteracts that. If it was just like this process, they could just like pop out babies on demand, then it would feel very godlike. But if every single aspect of it is fraught with pain, then it diminishes that God fantasy. Okay, desire for her husband. Okay, so this is another thing. What would happen? Okay, if women just had pain in childhood and they did not have a desire for men, they just wouldn't have kids, right? Okay, so this is like a countermeasure to make sure that she does seek out her a husband and that she does have kids, because otherwise the human race is going to be like, it's going to be bad for the human race, you know. And then he will rule over you is counteracting the fantasy of female independence, that she could just like be on her own, you know, and know that psychologically there's going to be a certain relationship to her husband that is going to, however you explain what that is, but that's going to keep her from like going off in that direction. Okay, now the man has his corresponding things. So what's man's fantasy is dominating the earth, okay, controlling the earth and producing growth. So now the earth is going to be cursed and it's not going to cooperate. Okay, thorns and thistles is counteracting man's fantasy of accomplishment, of like, look what I've done, like I have just summoned these things, and the fact that there are all of these obstacles that get in the way and he has to like work through and clear all the weeds and stuff makes him a servant of the earth, a slave of the earth.
And there's imperfection.
And there's imperfection also, right? Is that it's not just perfect. And then man working for life is this counteracts the fantasy of male independence, that I could just be my own guy. No. You are a slave to the earth. And in terms of the family role, so he has to provide for his family, you know, and so that keeps his ego in check. And then the last part of the Itahara is the immortality fantasy, which now that they can die, go goodbye to the immortality fantasy. Okay, I think, by the way, let me give you a choice here, because I think what we can do is, okay, yeah. So just this is a summary. The God fantasies remain a threat. Okay. What time do you want to stop? 8 or 8:30? And I honestly don't mind either way. Okay. What about you guys on Zoom?
I have to go at 8:15, but whatever's fine.
Okay. All right. So you know what I think we'll do? Let's just do one more step and stop, because I feel like, even though I said I want to get to number 3, I feel like I could refine it more. And this will be a good place to stop after we do 1. Okay, so we did Adam Nuchava's wife. Okay, but now she conceived and she bore Kayin, and she said, Vatomer, and she said, Kanisi ish es Hashem. I have created a man with Hashem. Now I mentioned when we went through the questions, there are different ways to understand this, whether it's good or bad. Okay, and we also noted that it just says she gave birth to Kayin, and she said, Kanisi ish es Hashem. Okay, so the way I want to learn this here is that even though Chava got these curses and punishments, she was still tainted by the God fantasy. And the way that she named and raised Kayin left a trace of that in Kayin and influenced his personality. Okay, so again, the majority of Mefarshim don't say that, but I found a couple that did. So Radak says that Anisi ish es Hashem. He says, V'samcha hamase la'atzma. She ascribed the act to herself. Lefi shehi ikar hamtzas avlad, because she was the main component in producing the offspring. Ubebitna notzar v'gadol ad shiatza, and it grew in her womb until it emerged. So it's interesting. She says, I have created a man with Hashem, and she doesn't mention Adam. Right? So she's taking primary credit. She's giving partial acknowledgement to Hashem, and she's not giving any acknowledgement to Adam, even though he clearly played a role also. Okay. The other way you can learn it is the way I read it, which I didn't find Mefarshim who said this, but I created a man equal to Hashem. Like Hashem is the only one who used to create men, and now I've created a man, and I am like God. And that would be like a full expression of the God fantasy. Okay. The Abrabbanel similarly says, Velinira Sha'amra came lihispire. She said this in order to glorify herself. Okay, so ego there. And he gives a slightly different interpretation than I gave. So the first time a woman was created, the Isha was niknis v'nasis mi ha'ish. She was created from the man. Bone from his bone and flesh from his flesh. Ata, but now nase ha'ish Kayin min Isha. Now she made a man from the woman. Chava imo be'ezras hakel isparach. Sorry. Nase ha'ish Kayin min ha'isha Chava imo be'ezras hakel. The man Kayin was made from the woman Chava, who was his mother, with God's help. Isparach. V'in mala in Kain od lazachar an keva. Now there's no advantage of man over woman. In other words, Adam used to be able to point to her and say, ha ha, you came from me. And so now she can say, ah ha, but now man comes from me, so now they're equal. And that's what she means, that I created man with Hashem, that she ascribed him to herself and not to the Father. I forgot to say one point, by the way. I alluded to it, but why is this last part thrown in after the curses? That man called his wife Chava because she was the mother of all living things, all living creatures. What does that have to do with like the curses? And it's right after, and she already had a name, which was Isha, right? That's what he named her. Or he says, he calls her Isha because because it doesn't say he named her. It says Lazos Yikari Isha. For this reason, she shall be called Isha because she was taken from Ish. So why does she get a new name, and why does he name her now, and why is this her name? And what does this have to do with the Onshin punishments?
Was she able to have kids before?
Yeah, she was apparently, because otherwise the curse wouldn't make sense, right? That it says now you will be giving birth in pain.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that the reason why this is here is this is an expression of the God fantasy. Okay, meaning right after their punishments, what immediately happens? The man names his woman, okay, and he names her a very accomplishment-oriented name of she's going to be the mother of all people, and it's funny because it satisfies both of them, because that's her God fantasy, is the fact that she can make people. And it's his God fantasy because he's naming her and like he's populating the earth with his offspring. And what this shows you, the reason why it's here, and whereas compare that to Ish and Isha, right? Isha is a very like clinical scientific name, but mother of all living people is like a very like ego-driven name, very God-driven name. So I think this is placed here because it's showing that his relationship towards her and their identity changed after this hate, even in spite of all these protective measures that God gave them, So that's why I'm saying that it spilled over into Kayin, that when she had Kayin, then that was yet another expression of her God fantasy. This midrash, I wasn't sure if it supported this theory, but it says, in the past, Adam was created from the earth, and the woman was created from man. But now, humans will be created in our form, like our likeness. I think that's ours, meaning humans. Like, again, we can make people like ourselves. But then the biggest support for my interpretation is Rav Hirsch. Okay, Rav Hirsch says the original conception of ownership rests on production. Man's primary capital is his strength. Hence, kana in its first meaning is not acquisition by money, but by strength, power, energy. Thus, God is konei shemayim v'aretz. He is the owner of heaven and earth because he created them. So too here, with God, i.e. with God's assistance and cooperation, I have acquired a male human being by the expenditure of my strength. So the first enthusiasm of the first mother was a raised feeling of self-importance, and the question can arise in our minds whether this feeling does not already show some clouding of the pure conception of motherhood. A mother standing on the pure height of consciousness of duty would have thought more of God and of the new duties and tasks which come with this gift of God, rather than proudly of her own merit. A clouding of the point of view and a disclosure of egotism and vanity, which very easily may have affected the tendency of the character of the son, on whose very name she imprinted the stamp of self-esteem. So he's basically saying, like the way I had explained it before, which is she had this feeling of ego at being a mother, and that impacted the way that she raised Kayin. Okay, and we're going to see that had disastrous results. Okay, yeah, I think that is actually a good place to stop, because that actually stops before the first actions of Kayin. Okay, all right, so to be continued. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming.
What weeks is this gonna be?
I don't know. I mean,
I'll